Welcome to Revolutionize Your Retirement Radio, bringing you insights and strategies to help you create a magnificent and fulfilling second half of life. Here's your host, certified professional retirement coach and best-selling author, Dr. Dorian Mintzer.
I want to welcome everybody to my fourth Tuesday Revolutionize Your Retirement Interview with Expert series. I'm Dorian Mintzer, owner of Revolutionize Retirement and your host for today. I'm delighted that all of you are here and that we have a very special guest, Jeri Sedlar, who's going to be with us. So now I want to introduce Jeri, and I'm just so delighted that she's with us. So Jeri is an internationally recognized author, speaker, and lecturer on the topic of retirement. She's co-author of the highly acclaimed book, Don't Retire, Rewire, 5 Steps to Fulfilling Work That Fuels Your Passion, Suits Your Personality, and Fills Your Pocket, and On Target. Enhance your life and ensure your success. For more than 20 years, Jeri has been actively researching individuals and organizations on the pleasure, pain, and possibilities associated with an aging society. Her findings led to the creation of the 5-step rewiring process, which focuses on finding new purpose, new passions, new play, and new work possibilities that promote healthy, fun, and fulfilling futures. Her belief is that life planning done in conjunction with financial planning allows individuals to leverage their personal and professional assets to the fullest. She's emerged as one of the country's leading thought leaders on the new way to do retirement, or, as I mentioned, and as she calls it, rewirement. Jeri served as senior advisor to the Conference Board on the Mature Workforce and as a judge for the AARP Best Employers Award for Workers 50+. She was a delegate to the White House Conference on Aging and is currently on the AARP Executive Council of New York. Her passion is the nonprofit sector and its related challenges, and she serves on many boards. She's a graduate of Michigan State and resides in New York City with her husband. And she and her husband, Rick Miner, co-authored this book. So, Jeri, I'm just delighted that you're here with us today. So welcome.
Hey, I'm pleased. Thank you for inviting me.
Well, thank you. And I know, having written a book that, having a book and having a third edition is a big deal. Tell us a little about how you got interested in this rewirement to start with and about this third edition.
Okay, let me go back then a little bit, and everybody can take a walk down memory lane here, and it's the late 1990s, and it's the dot-com era, and it just seemed like people were all talking about they'd hit their number, meaning a financial, and when you think about it, people had options in the market, what was going on, and you would go to events, parties, wherever, and people said, well, I'm thinking of retiring, and you saw these people maybe were late 40s, maybe some in their 50s, and it really struck me. I thought, wow, what's going on here? And one, I thought it was a little unrealistic because it was just looking at the financial side. And then what had happened, I was an executive recruiter at the time. We had our own search firm, and it was actually a client who really honestly just shared, and he said, hey, I'm 59, I'm going to retire, and it was from the Lucent organization, so this really goes back, but he said, all of a sudden I've been focusing so much on giving up all the, the commute, the budgets, the demands, the clients, and he said, it really makes me realize there's a lot more to this thing called retirement than just the financial side of it. So in a little bit of a nutshell right there, Dory, that's what really got me thinking. Are we as Americans really looking at the full picture? And that's when I started doing research, talking to both pre-retirees. And remember the baby boomers, we were the swell of it. And then we also started talking to people who were retired already and what were they experiencing. And then really starting to take a look at any disconnects, any connects, but it was really research and listening to people out there that really got my antennae up there first. And I've always been involved with careers and transitions, and as you went through some of my bio, the former editor-at-large of Working Woman magazine also. So workplace, personal growth, and development has always been key to me. But the new thing was that it was being positioned at this new life stage. And that's what really was the behind the scenes that led to the first proposal for the book. It was like a 60-some page proposal because we had all the research, and Penguin is our publisher, but we had all of that research supporting this. And the key part of it, and I know we'll talk a little bit about this further, but the key nut, if you want to say it, and how did we come up with these 5-step process, is that we realized that as people were looking at this thing called retirement or the future or their next act, that they were leaving more behind in the workplace, whether it was paid work, even when volunteer work ends. And my concern was that if you don't know what you're really leaving behind, that's going to make your future road a little bit bumpier and harder to maneuver. So that really is the idea of you retire from, you rewire to. So that was kind of a long way. Maybe we'll go deeper on some of these points. But the first edition came out in 2000. The second edition came out in 2007. And then we were asked by the publisher to do a third edition, which is a pretty big deal in a nonfiction kind of world and that. And that edition just came out this past August. So it's been interesting from a longitudinal to really track to see what pre- and post-retirees are thinking and doing, what's been similar, what's been different.
Which is wonderful. And I do want to really encourage people to get Jeri's book. The third edition has some new chapters and updated chapters and more research, and I think you'll find it really valuable. I know I have. So why don't you dig in a little bit? And because I mean, part of what's so impressive is the research that you've done, and I know you've done more research. So what have you found? What's changed since 2002?
Right. Well, I guess the biggest thing that hasn't changed are people. They're still questing. They're still living life 24/7 and, putting off some, what I call some internal investigations until they really need to. But I think one of the second edition of the book came out because with all the work that I was doing and being on the road, the second edition had new chapters because one that were focused on, and I know, Dory, this very much goes to your work too, but that's where I saw couples not on the same page, but not only not on the same page, but they didn't know how to get on the same page. I mean, it was as simple as if one was a morning person and one was an evening person, they didn't even know when to talk. It was such it was almost like a mountain that they just couldn't maneuver. So that was one thing why we came up with the second edition. And then the other part for the second edition was a lot of things had changed from the workplace. This was around the time the second edition had come out with the economic downturn, and, people had been trying to take a look at phased retirement, flex times, a lot of the different models, working in what we called a third way. So there were new things that had happened in the paid workplace that made us say, hey, a second edition is very needed here. With the third edition, and I'll be honest, when you have these 5 steps, those steps are solid. They don't change. But what we saw, and when in this instance, when our own publisher said, hey, there is a whole new group of people, and then you've got the Gen Xer being age 50, looking out to the future. Can we, take a look at a third edition? So Rick and I, and as you said earlier, Rick Miners is my husband and co-author and business partner, so we're also living proof that you can, work together and also still have a great marriage. But we went out and did more focus groups across the country. And there were some really interesting things this time. One, we talk about longevity. but people were really seeing it now. When they were sharing with us, like all of a sudden, my gosh, my grandmother just celebrated her 103rd birthday, then you were realizing that people were really talking about extreme sandwich generations now. So the longevity was real, and that was being played in two ways. One, people thinking, okay, well, financially, have I planned properly? But also, depending upon when you retired, people, and the research said, wow, I could almost be in retirement longer than I worked if I'm going to be the beneficiary of this longevity. And we all know, nobody knows who's going to get this gift. I call it a gift of longevity. However, you should know there were people in our audiences who said this is a curse. And because they, not just from the financial, were unsure, but they didn't have any interests. They didn't have any hobbies. They'd been working and living life flat on, and they let a lot of their social engagements go to the wayside. So longevity was making people think about what's in my life and what's not. The second thing that really came through probably was technology. The thing that people said, I don't want to be beholden to all these emails and having to do all the social media. They also realized, though, to a big degree, technology is going to be our lifeline, because it's getting built into so many different things in the overall aging space today. So people really just realized, I better learn this and really get it down pat. And somebody, as they were leaving their corporation, they said, wow, I'm leaving my tech guy too. And you have to think about that. All of a sudden, many of us get dependent upon, somebody from the tech department coming in and showing us how to do something. And I think people were genuinely surprised, like, wow, now it's really, up to me on this. The other thing had to do with money, and it wasn't just the savings or the investing of money. It was the usage of the money to get fulfillment, and that when you go into this next act, whether you're even maybe cutting down to part-time, that budgets, money will be used differently. And we got into some interesting discussions, and this is in the first chapter of the new edition, which I really love, and that is, are you getting the biggest bang for your money? But that goes back to, do you know what you want to do with that money? And what I mean by that is, when people have interests, even when it comes to vacations or buying something, this is a stage of life you really better know what does turn you on, so that when you're spending that hard-earned money, you really know that, hey, this is really going towards something that I really enjoy. And money and time. That was the other thing that came through in the focus groups, that, people said, wow, maybe I really do have less time in front of me than behind me. And nobody wants to be morbid, just realistic. And the whole discussion on time, people saying, oh, I have enough time. Well, do you? So these are some of the things that really came through in the research, but probably the biggest one was how many people said, even at age 55, could we look for a new career? Because we'd like to do something that'll take us out to about 72, 75. That was a major change. Because even though the book talks about the 5 steps to fulfilling work, that really, fuels your passion, suits your personality, we had never heard in the prior research groups this discussion of working all the way to 72 and 75. And Rick and I, you should know it, and the listeners should know it. Our feeling is, if you're doing work you love, keep on doing it. Because we know that there is a lot of fulfillment as well as funds that are coming out of that, that work engagement. But that work aspect was really an interesting thing. And when you see the 93-year-old, he was a financial advisor. He had his own company still, and being entrepreneurial does allow you the freedom to continue to work longer than off times in a corporation. But this man was still going, and that was, the comment, I'm going to bop till I drop. And we're like, hey, you go for it.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think so many people do talk about this, as you say, loving what they do, but also I think with the reality of knowing you're living longer, people want to earn more money so that, they really can have some aspects of the lifestyle they want for as long as they want. At least that's what I've, found among people too.
And this is an opportune thing to say to Dory about this is why it's so important about keeping up on our skills. And, and as people are listening, they get saying, well, which skills? I mean, sure, we talk about the technology, but it's understanding big data. It's whatever really relevant to your current position or one that you want in the future. We just have to make sure that we're staying sharp on this if we want to stay in the game. And that's really the key thing. If you still want to be viable and relevant, those were two of the words that really came out in the research. But sadly, it was on the flip side. People said to us, I don't feel I'm as relevant anymore. Well, then, the hard part is it's up to us to convince others that we are. And we do it in a variety of ways, from our image, our verbiage, our appearance, the way we, take charge and that. So it does become harder, but it's definitely doable. And we know that we've got the highest percentage of people over the age of 65 in the workplace today. So it is happening.
Absolutely. And I think you mentioned, the wanting to be relevant, the wanting not to be invisible, but, what you're saying, and I totally agree, is keeping up the skills, but also keeping up the technology and just staying connected. It's just, right. It is just part of our life in, the global world now. And if people don't do that, you end up, really disconnecting, which is, not a helpful thing. But, before we go on, maybe not everybody may know what you mean by rewiring. You did mention, and I agree 100% that, it's retirement's not the destination anymore. You retire from and you rewire to. So maybe you could spend a little bit of time just talking about what is rewiring, and then we can
rewiring. Okay,
yeah, right. What is rewiring? How did you come up with the term rewiring too?
Oh, okay. Well, that is a fun story here. So this definitely goes back. But I live in New York City, and one day we were over in the theater district, and you're going to see how far back this goes because we were at the store called Tower Records. So people should be laughing and thinking, whoa, when was the last time we heard the word records? And I also think that Tower Records has been gone, but this was in the year 2000. And we were in the store, and there was a huge poster of Tony Bennett and K.D. Lang on the wall. And that was the first Duets album. And I looked over there and I was, I said, wow, Tony is really wired for action. And Rick all of a sudden just goes, no, he's been rewired. And it stuck. We looked at each other and we said, well, what do we mean? And the whole thing was that Tony took, like all of us, the energy that he had always given to his traditional singing, but he really rewired that energy into a new and a different activity, and that was he had partnered with someone younger. And this came about, Dory, in a very interesting way because, Tony Bennett, my gosh, people know him and everything that he's done and continue to do. He even has an interesting career as a painter. But all of a sudden he realized, hey, I still love, making music. I still love working at this. But how do you compete or do it differently? And it was his, let me get this right, son's girlfriend, I believe, who had said, you need to go younger, Tony, and really partner with the MTV crowd. And this is how it became really going then with K.D. Lang and doing that very first Duets album. And we know then that Tony has gone on to do it with Celine Dion, Lady Gaga, a variety. Right. But what it really means for all of us listening then is to say, okay, when you decide you're going to lead your organization, sell your practice, do whatever, the energy is still going through your veins. It's still in your body. And all of a sudden you have to think, where is that energy going to go in the future? And more importantly, where do you want it to go in the future? And that's really the key. It's kind of like a lamp in really basic terms. When you turn off the light switch, the lamp may go out, but you know when you just turn it back on, all of a sudden it's there. And I sometimes equate people when they're leaving their organization or retiring if maybe they turned off their switch from the office, but then it's where you're going to plug in again. What new opportunity, possibility, what new thing is going to give you purpose? So if you really think about our own human body and that electricity and the energy and the enthusiasm that's going through us, that's the component. You may just retire from your organization where maybe you've worked for 30 years or whatever, but then you're going to rewire that energy and you're going to put it into new and different activities, some which may be paid or non-paid. But it's really taking your energy and thinking, where do I want it to go next? Because the truth is we do control that energy, but we have to have an idea of where we want it to go. So if you do think of Tony Bennett, everybody knows the song, I Left My Heart in San Francisco. He's got this wonderful legacy. But Tony was saying, you know what, it's not enough. And I believe he's just early 90s now and still going. Mm-hmm. So that's the idea of really rewiring your energy. But it does start with the desire to do it. And that's why we do talk in the book, too, about getting a rewired mindset or rewired attitude, that you have to want to do it. And, this is a life stage where it's a pretty clean slate for all of us. We may enter this next act with certain, responsibilities, but at the same time, it is a chance to create. And I do have to say, for many people, that's an excitement. And for many people, it's a fear. Because if you've left an organization where there was structure and where, we came from career pathing and we knew the ladders and we knew if we did this, we would hopefully move to this. Or if you were an entrepreneur, you had a sense of building a business. And now, for many, you look, and I use that line, we all say, the world is your oyster. It's true, but if you think about it, to crack an oyster, you have to have that special little knife, and sometimes you have to crack a few of them to find pearls. So that's the way I feel about this next act. You have to want to create this next act, and this term rewiring, it's a process. It's not an end game. It's the process that helps you through transitions. And it isn't just that initial transition when you say, okay, I'm leaving my organization or I've sold my practice. You can rewire as many times as you want or as much imagination as you have or as much desire. Because as you and I said earlier, one, hopefully we've got longevity on our side, but two, with technology on our side. Not only can it help us rewire, but the truth is it also can give us some pretty cool ideas about where to rewire.
And I love your example of Tony Bennett, too, because it's the intergenerational piece, too, that, to maybe think about where our energy is and maybe think about connecting with people in a different way, but still, sort of keeping the fire alive in our belly, keeping the juices flowing in some ways.
That's it. And this is time to make a comment when people will say, the younger generation doesn't want to hear from me. It's like, we all need each other. But I think sometimes, Dory, it's how we do it. They have things to share with us. My God, some of the things they know on social media and bringing us into all of it, but the different things that we also can share with them. But I think you have to be open. You have to realize that we all need each other. So I've just been sharing with a variety of people too, that even in your network, I realize we're jumping on this a little bit, but the truth is I say to people, don't have people all your age, because you're all going through the same thing. You're all feeling it. You want people of a variety of ages. Get some of the coolest people you know who are older than you, because if you admire them and they're role models, all of a sudden it's like, wow. I mean, I have this friend, and she said, well, Jeri, I'm going to tell you my age. And I said, okay. And she said, I'm 95. And I'm like, wow. And you don't know for sure, Dory, like, are you supposed to say, you're kidding me? She is so remarkable about what she is doing. And then she shared with me that she takes a swimming class every morning too. I said, oh, now I'm really embarrassed. I mean, I'm not doing that well with all the fitness. So here she's my role model at one end, and at the younger end, you know, my niece who's a senior in college is, you know, sharing different ideas, you know, with me on some exercise thing you can do, you know, with FaceTime, and your instructor doesn't even have to be in the same state with you. So my feeling is, as long as we're open, this is a big part of the rewiring. You got to get your head on in a different way if you're really going to make the most of this future. My view.
No, I totally agree. I mean, it's part of that paradigm shift that, you know, if you're going to view it as downhill, it will be downhill. But if you can, you know, really open to these possibilities, excuse me, there's so much excitement, even though but it can be scary, as you say. So, you know, how do people know when it's time to rewire? You know, we don't have the specific, you know, you have to retire now in most industries. I mean, it does exist in some. So, you know, and I know you talk about rewiring being something that can be done at various stages, at whatever age you are. But, you know, what are indicators that people, you know, that it's important for people to start thinking about this, quote, rewirement?
Well, it's rather funny right now, because two different friends, totally different fields, have just asked the question, how do you know? And I know this is a little bit, it's not a cop-out line, but I will say you begin to recognize it like in your gut. I said, get rid of this thing about an age, because, you know, yes, our society, when you think about, you know, FDR putting Social Security in and that at age 65, that sadly put this marker. But the truth is you can go much longer than that, or if you are younger, you can say, I've got some dreams that I want to pursue, and some of them I have to make a change earlier. Let me just say one thing of somebody that I happen to be working with on this who does want to put a dream in place. However, you know, there is that thing called with insurance and with Medicare and getting to age 65. So the first thing I said to her is there a chance that you can begin to go part-time? And she is 61 and a half, almost 62, I guess. And she said, well, I don't know. I don't think they do that. My first comment was ask. Because you have no idea until you ask. And so in this instance, yes, she was able to go into a part-time situation. And she is teeing herself up now to take a look at something else. And it's a travel component also tied with work too. The interesting thing is that now that she is part-time, Dory, she's actually able now to sit and reflect on things a little bit better. She's in the nursing arena. So sometimes there's flexibility there, sometimes not as much. She was able to capitalize on this. But she knew it because she was just physically getting burned out. She just knew that this wasn't going to, you know, really be it. So now through this part-time, she felt it, and she asked, and she got this reward. Now, somebody else I know is late 60s and is just very honest in saying, I don't know. what I would do if I would retire. And he's, in a situation where how do I say it? I think he would like to, but he is absolutely terrified of not having anything to do. And that's probably what I hear a little bit more when people have this retirement that they're able to do it, but they don't know what to do next. So it's really working. And when you said, different coaches and everything too, is to get, individuals to begin to take a look at what are some of the interests, what are some of the ideas. And we even have exercises in the book that really take people back in 5-year, like chunks of time, to begin to see what were some of those dreams. Or an interesting way to do this is, what were some of the accomplishments you've had or achievements, and you would like more of those? Because the truth is, I think people really do need they're not all self-starters. They need some real, cues and guides along the way. That's why I am the biggest proponent too of people spending some time, with a coach to get teed up, because to begin to take a look, and that's why we did a 5-step process in this, so that people can take the time to go through these steps and to begin to analyze what's important and what's not. But when you asked about this, and I alluded to it earlier, rewiring, a lot of corporations and boards have at the age of 72 when people will have to leave some board with, paid corporate boards or whatever. And more people along the way have said to me, I'm not going to worry about this, Jeri, until I have to leave the board. So they were holding on to something as long as they could. And now I know 4 individuals who are just hitting that age 72 and have all been told that they will be facing the end of their terms and they can't be extended. And those people are now beginning to say, oh my gosh, how am I going to rewire? And so they just postponed it. But you know what? It still gets you finally. And that's what they are going through now, trying to understand what their drivers are. And let me kind of take a few minutes here then to talk about this a little bit for everybody.
I think that would be great. And yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Big pieces, a piece of the research that we did for the very, the initial work was, we asked the question, why do you or did you work beyond the money? So we did in our initial research about 300 people. Now it's well over about 1,000, 2,000. We asked that question unsolicited. So we did it in focus groups. We did it on different questionnaires, surveys, and that. But it was all unsolicited. And we got back 85 reasons. And some of them, they duplicated slightly. But they ranged from people said, I want to have accomplishments. I want to belong. I want to be creative. Others said, I want to mentor. I want to make a difference. I'm a problem solver. Then some people started to acknowledge, I like the recognition. I like to be valued. I like to be a leader. I like power. So on this list of 85, we honed them down to the top 30, and we go very deep in the book on exploring these. We have supportive questions, but we have the whole list of 85 at the back of the book. To us, Dori, this is kind of probably the most important ingredient, and it's the missing link, and I truly believe it's why there is a 3rd edition and the success and how this has helped people. Because we are doing life so fast, we don't always take the time to really recognize what gives us our buzz, what does really turn us on. So often people say, that was great, but that's the moment I want people to stop and say, why? Why was it great? What was happening? Was it a presentation you did? Was it the most unbelievable PowerPoint? Was it a sale that you made that said, man, I can't believe this? Was it when a child in a class said, I get this, I understand? Those things all relate back to fulfilling us in our work. And again, this can be paid or volunteer. But our belief is you need to know these, and we call them your drivers, but they're really like your personal DNA. They're your motivators. We don't care what the person's drivers are, and our dream is that people get down to their top 5 drivers. And it takes time, and it's a process. But this can become the most invaluable schematic that you, in a way, will rewire against in your whole life. And I'm going to use an example on something. In this research, one of the people that participated in our work, she had been down at American Express thinking of retiring, and she participated in our work. And remember, she told us key interest of hers was homeless, and we said, hey, this is great. I didn't see her, though, I'll be honest, for several months. And then I had run into her on the street one day, and I said, hey, how's it going? I know you were, planning on doing different not-for-profit and different things. And, she said, I'm working in the soup kitchen. I said, what? Great. I know the homeless were important. I said, how's it going? And she said, I just hate it. And it was like, no, wait a minute here. You're doing this on your own. And I was like, but I thought that was so important. But then when she and I met again to go over, when it came, yes, she had this interest. Very much. It still is homeless and the feeding programs and that. However, she wanted to be creative. She wanted to make a difference, which she was. She also wanted to be a problem solver, and she wanted to be some leadership. Well, when we took a look at this, we realized although she was doing the hands-on work, she was making a difference. But when it came to her other drivers, she was not getting driver fulfillment. And what we could honestly say to her is, hey, you still have the same interest. It's so important. But rather than being right in the service area, you might be better off working for an organization that allows you to solve the problems of feeding the homeless. And to make a long story short, that's exactly what she did. She got involved on the program side of one of New York's feeding programs here and is actually now on the board. That's a way of showing how people can have an interest, but you've got to link it with your drivers, because I'm sure all of us who have met people who love their volunteer work or they love what they do. And, very easily you can say, whoa, they're hitting on all cylinders because they're getting the fulfillment from it. But when you hear the person who goes, no, I'm really not enjoying it as much, you realize it just isn't the right volunteer or board or advisory role. That's why these drivers are such a critical part of the whole rewiring process. I'll say it now. People will say, oh, I'm so busy. I'll be honest with you, Dori. I don't want people just to be busy. There's never a shortage of things to do. I want people to be fulfilled, because that's where you're engaged. We use that word engagement, but that's where, if you take a look at the work that the neuroscientists talk about, that's what we call focused engagement, where you are so steeped in it and you're loving it so much, whether it's for your passion, whether it's purpose, whatever, and you lift your head up and you're like, wow, I can't believe a few hours have passed. That's what we're talking about here. And if you've got this gift of longevity, I want people through life to be finding these new type of possibilities. So that's why when we say you can rewire as many times, bored activities will end. Or what happens when, hey, you're an avid golfer and you damage your rotator cuff. and maybe, through surgery, you need something else. So it can even be health situations or friends or family move away. So that's why this whole thing, talking about having an active life portfolio made up of work and play and community and self-activities is so key. When people are so immersed just in one thing, I know that they may love it, but I always say too, you wouldn't put all of your money in just one stock or in one equity or one financial instrument. Don't put all of your time, your effort, your energy just in one thing either, because if something goes a little south, you could have that bump. Doesn't mean you can't rewire and get back on the track, but cast your net a little bit wider. I know it's kind of one of those, comments that people always say, but I do believe there's truth in it.
Mm-hmm. Great. I want to start integrating some of the questions that people who are listening have, as well as I've got a whole bunch of my own. But Maura from Paris says she'd love to hear more about what are the 5 steps to rewirement, and maybe you can sort of mention
okay. Well, I will go through those.
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay.
I'll go through those, real quickly here. So the first one is what we say is you got to see the opportunity. That retiring is a going from and rewiring is a going to. And you got to see it. Because if you really don't believe it, like you alluded to earlier, Dori, you're not going to take the next step. The second step is identifying your drivers, which we have just been spending a lot of time on now. Know what makes you tick, because those are, as I said, you get your top 5 and they become your lifelines. The third step then is linking those drivers to your activities. So that's why I began to, use the example of the woman who was doing the work in, the home, with the homeless, the feeding program. Why was she so unfulfilled? And then she became fulfilled. So with same interest, but different activity. The fourth is really creating your rewired vision. And this is the area in the book that we use a lot of exercises. We show you how do you really go back and look at some of those dreams and the interests that you postponed, you forgot about. You kind of just said, one of these days I'll do it. Well, guess what? Rewiring this life stage is one of those days. To show owning your accomplishments, as I alluded to earlier, we take you back like in 5-year increments. And somebody I will share with you did this work, went all the way back through and discovered that she had been very good, like in sales as a little kid in the Girl Scouts. It led her at age 55 to change a career into sales. Now this is how all this ties together. And then the 5th step is putting your action plan in motion. So the book is it's organic. It's all about you and for you, and we really show how do you put your possibilities in action. And also, we follow 4 people through the book because we want this to be a living experience for our readers. In a way, we talk to them through the pages in the voice that I'm trying to use with you all today, and to say, you know what, we're all in this together. We talk about perspectives and realities, but those are the 5 steps. They are very meaty, M-E-A-T-Y, but I think that they're not to be rushed. And again, I think why, when you said earlier, do you have a 3rd edition? Because that's what this book is about. It really shows people, it guides them in a very optimistic yet realistic. We're not Pollyannas. Okay?
And I think it's a helpful book in that. I have a question, then I do want to integrate more of the others. So,
sure.
When you talk about the drivers and the motivators, what's your sense of how does that relate to character strengths and values, and sort of how do you see that interrelationship?
Well, this is an interesting one. In the first 2 editions of the book, we did not say anything about values. The reason we did not pull them out specifically is because I think that, values are our foundation. They're our core. And early on, we just didn't really know how to integrate them in. We are not doctors, therapists, so we know we can only go so far. However, in this 3rd edition, we do have a list of values, and we do talk about them. And I'll be honest, it really came up because one day I had made the comment thinking about doing some different volunteer work myself, and I remember myself making the comment, I love to be surrounded by beauty. Now, beauty is a funny word, but where I was really going, and I do volunteer work at the Metropolitan Museum with Alzheimer's, our guests who come to the museum there. So for me, the beauty was the architecture, the art, and history. So that's what we try to bring in, people valuing family. So it's definitely there in this 3rd edition, but we did it, I guess, as a combination piece without really pulling it apart. And when you're talking about the character strengths, that's kind of then linked together for us, where we probably do spend a lot in tying that in with also when we talk about taking an inventory of your skills, we try to package it in that way, Dori. Mm-hmm. But it's a part of the entire package of what we're trying to do. But again, realistically, each component only has X amount of time and space in the book.
Right. Yeah. So that's just the fact of life.
Yeah.
So let me integrate some of these other questions. There's some really good questions here too, some additional good questions. So John from Wilbraham, Massachusetts says, as an owner of the 2nd edition, I pulled a lot of value from your work. I have the impression that the ability to rewire belongs to a group of people who have more resources than most, of which I'm one. There's so many people that need to delay their retirements just to survive. What's your advice for them?
And yes, John, I don't disagree that having resources are definitely an asset. And my work with AARP here in New York State allows me the full breadth of people at all points on the spectrum. But as I mentioned, and the woman who was a nurse and beginning to go part-time, that decreased her stress and anxiety, still kept her in what I'm going to call the financial game and with insurance. But I guess I would say when you know that you're having to work, that's why it becomes even more important to me to know how you are using your money, where you are using your money, because it's but I want you to still get the enjoyment from your money. So that's why the drivers are key, but I want to go back and say something. And when we did this initial work, I'm originally from Michigan, and we actually went back and did work on different people in the automotive industry, people who had been on the line. We wanted to get a cross, reference to everybody. So I don't want anybody to think that, only people who have money can rewire, because boy, that isn't the truth from the people I've seen across, the United States. The reality is that we know we need X amount from a financial standpoint, but for the people who are still working, I'd say please begin to think about the different interests. Where, what else, what family member, what community, what else gives you the joy? Because, taking care of yourself is still I think a mandatory thing having to do with rewiring.
I think that's sort of the underlying, if you don't take care of yourself around the rewiring, none of this will probably happen. So let's see, I'm just looking at all these there's so many good questions here. So Bob from Padoka, I never say it right, says, Jeri, excellent work. Love the rewire, your energy process, and transitions. How do you recommend rewiring for clients facing declining energy and resources due to longevity related to just the aging process and challenges of daily living?
Oh, no. Okay, this is so when we were first working on the book and meeting with different doctors in the field, and they had said, well, are you going to talk about boredom? Are you going to talk about depression? Because those are things that definitely can occur when work, as I said early on, when work is removed, sometimes people go, yay, work is gone. But then when all of a sudden you realize, whoa, that's where I got my attaboys, or it's where I got my attagirls, then you're realizing, wow, there's a void there. And I think that sometimes people's energy begins to wane also because they don't know how to and where to rewire it. And that's where the finding the nugget or finding that one interest or idea that really might charge them. And this is where it does take time talking to somebody, because it just happened the other day. I was with somebody for about an hour, and finally I would swear like after about 57 minutes, it came on the screen, and I said, you're interested in jazz? And he said, oh yeah. And there the floodgates opened. And it was like, wow. So I know it takes time with the coaching, and even when I do the work from the speeches and on the platform, and that's why I say a lot of us, we're doing self-excavation and we're helping others, look inside themselves. That's why we have so many different exercises in the book, and why the work that I've done. I'd been with Merrill Lynch for about 8 years doing work with their clients, and if you could imagine at like dinner events and people sitting there and taking quizzes, we didn't know whether this would work or not. But the truth is, people really do value being asked some of these questions and trying to unearth what's inside of them. Sometimes people are just hoping that somebody else can kind of throw their energy switch. So sometimes the aging is a part of it, or sometimes that's just what we say because the person doesn't know how to get re-engaged. And then I'm going to say, for any people who are involved with the not-for-profit and volunteering, make sure that we're not editing people out either, because there are a lot of boomers and older who still want to volunteer, and I sure hope that people are being receptive to bringing them on board.
Mm-hmm. When you say editing out, just sort of not supporting volunteering, or how do you mean?
Well, it's like sometimes, when people are... everybody listening on this, the next time you walk by a mirror or like a glass window, look and see if you got a bounce in your step. And I know that sounds funny to say, but that's a part of it too. It isn't just the energy in our voice or what we're saying, but how we look. Do you walk into a room with a bounce in your step, or do you kind of slink in? And what happens is that when people lose some of their energy, their shoulders are rounded over a little bit, and sometimes then people who are looking for new volunteers will not be as prone. So sometimes I will say to people, you got to rewire your presentation a little bit before you even go, to interview for this volunteering. And then they'll say, for a volunteer opportunity? I'll say, yeah. And I think people forget that there are many people out there, who want to do volunteer work. Why should they take you versus someone else? So that's why I say this whole rewiring is your entire persona. And sometimes people just go, oh, is it worth it? It's worth it if they can find the right thing and believe in it and say, wow, this is great. But it takes time, and I think it takes the hard work of all of us on this call to be helping people to find it.
Mm-hmm. Great, thanks. All right, here's some more questions. And thanks thankfully, Jeri has said she can stay a little bit past 1 o'clock because I know it is top of the hour now, or whatever time it is, top of the hour for wherever you're living. So let's see. So Cullen from Hawaii asks, does rewiring that incorporates purpose beyond ourselves or purpose that targets the next generation, which is preferred? Can you share your thoughts on the primacy of purpose and what that means to you?
Well, I'm going to step back a minute. I think that that word purpose took on a very great import. People would start to say, remember, there have been books of purpose-driven life and a lot going on out there. Well, Rick and I came up with something, and we call it purpose with a big P and a little p. There are some people who want to save the world. And let me tell you, that is purpose with a capital, P. There are others who the purpose is a smaller. And not to negate anything that I may say, because to somebody else that may be like a bigger P. Like somebody, said, I want to make a difference in the life of my grandchildren, and that is the new purpose. Other people, will say, I want to become a triathlete, do the so now they're intensifying their purpose on that. I met a lot of people, traveling now, through their church doing volunteer work. And that is another level of purpose, which, could be a big P or a small P. I guess to me, the purpose is, I don't want to get caught up in it. To me, it's what gets you up in the morning and has a meaning to it and goes back to fulfilling those drivers. Somebody said, do I only have to be doing things that are, with major purpose? Hey, I will tell you right now, I know people who are across this country who are playing tons of bridge. Now, that is their decision. It's intellectually stimulating for them. It's giving them social engagement. It's fulfilling a lot of those drivers. Somebody else could be judgmental and say, well, what's the purpose? Well, just what I said. It's giving them community, social engagement. This is not the time to be judging, others. I guess what I say is it's trying to assist others in the work we do to maybe find something that comes of purpose. But if somebody says the new purpose is at this stage of life, I want to take up pottery and learn how to throw pots, well, that's a new purpose. But we went through a thing, Dori, where it seemed like it had to be a lot bigger. And the other word linked into this, meaningful. Okay, meaningful to who? If this is meaningful to me, that I am making these pots and it is allowing an inside part of me to come out, then so be it. But that's, that could be a whole other talk. About who's rewiring is it?
Yeah, exactly. And what does success and all of that mean to you? It's a whole other talk, but a good one. So a few more questions here. So Jane from Wellesley said, what's the best way to get started in this process when you've been stuck in the past? When you know and feel and you want to make these changes and get it going. So basically, how do you get unstuck?
Okay, I'm going to say this is one of those commercial things. First, if you haven't bought the book yet, do. Because anything that has a process to it and is a thoughtful process, Jane, I think is what really, it's in the fact that we follow for people. So you see their challenges. You see their dilemma. You may be reading and say, oh my gosh, I didn't think they would take that path or that journey. One of the biggest things is that we have to realize we're not all in, we're all in this together, and sometimes when people see something or even like you may be on a call now or when I'm, delivering a program, people go, oh my gosh, I thought it was me just going through this. Man, that word retirement rut, the word rut in life, it just means I'm getting bored a little bit. You know what? Boredom is good because it says, hey, I need that little kick now to get me on to the next. And then it begins the journey of, well, what do I want next? We even met with Governor Ann Richards several years ago, and she was fabulous. And one of the exercises in there, which is very prophetic if you think about it, she said, if you knew you had 5 years to live, what would you want to do? And then she broke it down to like a year and then 6 months. Let me tell you, the fact that, Governor Richards is gone, but yet that was an exercise she gave to us really as a gift for this. Start to do it for ourselves. And it's not being gloom and doom. It's just being honest and saying, hey, if I only knew I had X amount of time, effort, energy, and money, what do I really want to do? And maybe you're going to come up with 10 things, or maybe 20 things, or maybe just 2. But at least you've taken the time. And I'm a big proponent, buy yourself a little journal. Don't sit at home. Go to the diner. Go to Starbucks. Go to the park. Get out of your space and put your phone down and just say, hey, what really, be the kid again and just let your kite out.
Oh, I love that image. Let the kite out. Be a kid again.
I love to use that.
Yeah, that's lovely. John from North Carolina says, many folks retiring from corporate life look forward to or need a next act. Do you encourage them to continue on in a capacity industry they're comfortable with and success may be predictable, or try something new which may be riskier and potentially lead to an uncomfortable experience? I think you kind of responded to that before, but let me just, ask that question.
But you should know, too, because Rick, too, has spent so much time in the overall executive search and outplacement industry. Mm-hmm. So we tell people like a schematic. So it's plan A. Plan A would be kind of just what you said, more of the comfort. I can use my skills here. I can continue in this. And if you can get a job in that arena and you think once you've done your drivers and you know that, hey, this feels good, I want to do this, fine. However, if you're saying, I'm a little itchy, I do want to try something else, or I've heard so much about this new area, big data, research, whatever, I want to see if maybe I can repackage myself and my skills and that resume in some way and put it out there and see if it works. Go for it. Then probably the third column is, people will say, I want to be the boss now at this stage. I want the consulting practice. And I always say, that's great. But remember, a consultant needs clients. So make sure that whatever you are going to be offering, that you've taken the time to really build that client base, or you have an idea of who's going to be in this client base. But also, too, it's like, this is where you need to know where your financials are. Do I need to keep the same salary, replace the salary? Can I just, are we really just saying I want to do something that's totally different and I am okay salary-wise? This is going back to one of those earlier questions. You really have to know what your financials look like, what you can afford to really take out for the future, too.
Yeah, I think the financial piece is such an important underpinning of it. So another question is, what happens if what you know is really important to you and society doesn't sort of recognize that?
Oh, dear, that is like a life question, I think, for whatever it is. I mean, isn't that what we all go through? It's like, don't they see it? And we all know the answers. Not always. So right. If it's something I will just say that you really believe in, then you have to think about if people aren't seeing it, how am I positioning it? Can I tweak it differently? Is there another way? Is there another angle that I can bring this forward? Why is it so important to me? Because we do know passion sells. And if you, whatever the idea is, that can, that helps too. But you can't just have the passion and the emotion. I told somebody recently an idea, get the numbers behind it. Think of the verbs you're using. And if you can really demonstrate in some way with that mini business plan and lay it out, hey, sometimes you really do have a chance. other things, but it's kind of like when we started this conversation saying about the research that was done. Was I just hearing something from people, or was there something really there? So people do need to be convinced, and I think today it's hard because, gosh, there is just so much competition, but it doesn't mean that whoever asks this question isn't going to be the one that can really reposition their idea and be the one that pulls out of the pack. Mm-hmm. But if you really believe in it, go forward. But I'm going to say something too. You come to a certain point, folks, that I'm going to cut bait. Mm-hmm. And that I know is really hard, but I have seen people for so long go after and spend the money and spend the time, effort, energy, and it's just not there. So you also have to be honest with yourself on a lot of this too, and to say, maybe it's not the right idea, maybe my moment in time has passed, but if you really feel that you have done everything and exhausted all of it and just said, I can't take hitting my head against the wall anymore, then learn from the experience, have the guts to sit down and analyze what went right, what went wrong, and then either go forward or find another area. Don't give up too soon, but don't hang on till the very end either. Because that can be pretty debilitating and depressing over time. Yeah.
I think that's great advice. All right, 3 more questions, then we'll pull it together. So Don from Canada says, it's sort of tied in, but how do you ensure your rewired self solves real problems that society tends to ignore or dismiss?
Run that by me again. How do you know your rewired self?
Yeah, how do you ensure that your rewired self solves real problems that society tends to ignore or dismiss?
That's up to you. That's the most individual, personal thing that really relates to this life act. That's why when I said it's a clean slate, but I guess I should use the word too, it is the most unique time. And this really goes back that Dori, I will say this. I've met so many people who do view this time as to say, I want to solve society's issue. And this does tie in with just the earlier kind of question too. Right. People, if this is it, then go forward. If it's that burning issue, if it's that passion, 1, you can do it on your own, or 2, this is where people have a belonging driver, myself included. I don't want to do all these things alone. I want to begin to think, is there a group? Is there a community? Who can I partner with? I like to be with like-minded people. How do I, marry with others? And change very rarely today happens alone. So this person who's asked this question, if you're having this idea, there's other people that are too. So I would say, and this is where technology, the internet, you can, partner with somebody depending upon where they are in the world. But, be cautious with your idea too. I always say loose lips sink ships. But yeah. So if that's something that is your burning, and you think of the word we talk, passion, purpose, meaningful, linked with your drivers, new activity, this is where it all comes together. So I will say, up in Canada, get it down. That's why the last step is putting that possibility into action. And it really is your kind of like schematic, like, okay, what's it going to take for me to do this? And I always use the line, and I'll give it away, WIT. Some people think it stands for WIT. But to me, it stands for whatever it takes.
That's great, yeah. All right, just a couple more, as I said. This is sort of a couples question from Gail and Sharon, and she says, my husband and I are both considering retiring. We're both upper to mid-60s, not on the same page about the timing. She wants to start sooner, having difficulty convincing him, and he wants to wait for her. Do you have any suggestions? I know you mentioned about Volume 2 was more about the couples, and I know you even in Volume 3 you have some issues about couples. What suggestions do you have for couples who aren't on the same page about this rewiring?
But right there, my feeling is that if we've met couples that definitely want to go out together, and that's it. But if this is an instance right here where, one is saying, I want you to try it on first, my feeling is try to figure out, well, if you want me to go first, then it's almost like Sharon, then go ahead. Because sometimes it's hard when two people are trying to get the lay of the land together. So sometimes it's easier when the first one kind of goes out and kind of sees what's going on. Because if you get two people and you're not joyously wanting it together, that's where I think you can kind of get some of the biggest bumps. The reverse one, which I've heard, too, is that the one really wanted to keep on working and said, but I'm not going to because I can't face the fact that you'll be able to stay in bed and I have to go to work. Now, that's not the right kind of reason not to do it either. But you know what? This is the kind of thing that to kind of sit down and go and on these couples questions, why do we want to go out now? Beginning to talk about what are our dreams, because surprisingly, somebody may want to take a class. Somebody may want to begin to downsize, look at things differently. And you can get to write your scripts together, but often there has to be a lead dog. And so I would say to you, too, the fact that you're talking already and you're at this point, continue the discussion.
Mm-hmm. Good advice again. And I think this one is from Barbara in New Jersey. She says, what an amazing interview. I love the reference of examining the DNA of each prospective retiree in order to detect what drivers, activities, rewards, etc. will unlock the ultimate fulfillment in this most exciting new chapter of our lives, rewiring. What additional steps can one take to unravel one's DNA? And she asks questions, coaching, journaling, retreats, and she says, I'm sold. So what are your suggestions on how to...
I love that. I'm never going to have those too. Thank you. I think in one all of the above, and gosh, that whole thing just put a smile on my face too, because what we're talking about here is fulfillment, and one of mine, I'll say my drivers is a belonging. So to me, Dori, being with like-minded, the people on this call, whether they're the receivers, the giver, combination of both. The second is I personally love to be, current. I love to know what's going on in new experiences. But third one, it really is to make a difference. And that's what I've gotten even from the type and the caliber of the questions here. And for me, it's recognition now just on work well done. So to me, the audience today has really given me driver fulfillment. And if we can all find those things, it is wonderful. So it is kind of like the DNA. But I will say, too, boy, it does take time. Even as smart as we all are on this call, it still takes time.
It certainly does. And finally, from Pam, from Winston-Salem, she says she's used your book for personal reasons for over 12 years and she loves it. Now she's a retirement coach and she wonders, could she get permission to use your book as a basis for a workshop? She'd certainly buy it and have participants buy it, but she wants to know sort of how you feel about people using your rewirement process in workshops.
Okay. So what we have done, if people are interested, please make sure that Pam connects with me directly. And I should say to Pam that Rick Miners, my husband, is a graduate of Wake Forest, so spent a long time Winston-Salem. And yes, we definitely will work with coaches. Penguin has given us like verbiage to use on documents and particularly the drivers. So of course, if people are interested, why don't you just have them come to me so that we can work directly. So we can control this, but yet at the same time give people the freedom to really help their clients.
Great. So this might be a perfect time for you to let people know how they can reach you and how to buy your book.
Okay, great. Well, I was going to say you can reach me directly at Jeri Sedlar, Sedlar, at don'tretireRewire.com. And then we have the website also. And the book is available, the easiest way I always say is Amazon. I know it's still in bookstores, but finding bookstores today isn't always the easiest. So it's wonderful through, Amazon. And, sometimes coaches too with clients have bought them, shipped them to us to have them autographed. Rick and I are real flexible. And as I said earlier, we're all in this together, and we want everybody to have fulfilling futures.
Great. Jeri, this has been wonderful. I think we could go on and on and on, but you've already gone on and on and on, and I am sorry for keeping you so long.
No. But, hey, my pleasure. Great questions. Everybody just sounds terrific. And again, Dori, I really do thank you. And hey, if we want to do more in the future, just, give a holler and we'll make it happen.
I will do that. And I really encourage people to get her book. As I said, I think you'll find it really, really helpful.
You've been listening to Revolutionize Your Retirement Radio with Dr. Dorian Mintzer. To learn more about the resources mentioned on today's show, listen to past episodes, or download our free retirement transition guide, visit revolutionizeyourretirementradio.com.